After years of Sidemount diving, I made the jump to closed circuit rebreather. People told me at the time it would be a game changer, but no one warned me about the sheer terror of my first buoyancy check. Welcome back to D for Diving's YouTube channel, where today, following up from last week's video about returning to Sidemount, we're going to have a chat breaking down why I switched from Sidemount to CCR and some of the brutal challenges I faced on that journey. And of course, why it's worth the pain for recreational divers. So for recap, why was I diving Sidemount in the first place? The reality was I sucked air, and I needed a method of being able to increase my bottom time, and to do that, I needed to carry more gas. And so some of the pros and cons of choosing Sidemount was, significant pro was it gave me 2 tanks, but it was better than a back mount twin set insofar as it split into 2 and was easier for transportation. Of course, the cons were it was quite fiddly with lots of hoses and routing and clips and bungees and straps, and hooking it in and making the whole setup just so took a lot of finessing. And the appeal of CCR, well, no bubbles. I could extend my bottom time by virtue of the fact that I'm diving with a nitrox mixing machine on my back. And compared to a set of doubles, it's a lot lighter for travel. And actually with this rig I've got, compared to a Sidemount rig, it's actually not that much heavier either. Now imagine this, I go diving to 30 meters for 60 minutes, and I come back on the boat with enough gas and enough zorb for another 3 hours worth of diving. That is a game changer. Now, I thought when we first learned to dive and we learned the basics of buoyancy control that was hard. I remember doing my dive master course and having some IDC staff instructors assessing us as we were doing our skills demos. Back then we were on our knees, and I was looking at these staff instructors hovering there, perfectly motionless, filling data in on their data sheets, assessing us. And I thought, wow, that's impressive. That level of buoyancy control is impressive. And it takes a while for you to get that control of your airway, to be able to move yourself up and down in the water column. And so when I switched to CCR, I had been told that buoyancy control would be a challenge again, but nothing quite prepares you for how much of a challenge. Now, why? Why is it that buoyancy control becomes a problem? Well, for somebody who's experienced a lot of diving, we know exactly how much weight to carry, and we know exactly how much air to put in our lungs to affect our altitude in the water. As we start to descend, we take a sharp inward breath and we arrest that descent very quickly. As we start to ascend, we can exhale and we can control it nicely, just all using our lungs. We switch to a rebreather though, and it's a closed loop. As I descend, I inhale, and I've just inhaled out of a counter lung, which means that I carry on going down because the volume of gas in the loop hasn't changed. It's just gone from a counter lung to my lungs. Similarly, as I'm going up, I start to ascend too fast. I exhale quickly and I just fill the counter lung with all the air that was in my lung, and I've made no difference, and I still keep going up. And so you learn very quickly that the index finger becomes very important until you can control your buoyancy. Why the index finger? You push it onto the rocks and the sand and the seagrass to stop yourself from face planting into it as you're diving along, and then you can adjust loop volume or BCD volume and get it right. It was a painful experience. So I clearly recall an experience when I was first diving on the rebreather when my partial pressure was a little bit higher than I wanted it to be. So inhale deeply, fire the auto diluent valve, and I bring air into the loop to lower my partial pressure, and then start shooting to the surface because I've just increased loop volume by adding more air in. Very quickly you learn you have to lower loop volume before you can add new gas to the loop. And this is part of the very steep learning curve that comes with closed circuit rebreather diving. And so there's a common comment when it comes to diving on a rebreather, and that is that rebreathers aren't learned, they're absorbed. They're absorbed through sheer repetition and repetition of all of the actions you need to do until eventually you learn them quite quickly. And it's a steep learning curve, made even more steep if you have a lot of experience on open circuit diving. In my first 50 hours, I kind of felt a lot like Bambi on ice, flailing everywhere, not really knowing what I was doing. And I am so very grateful that there wasn't much video taken during that time. Some of the key challenges that you're facing over this time are looking at some of the problems that you might have. You're learning your pre-dive safety checks and your setup checks, and you're using checklists to do those. And one of the first times that I didn't use a checklist and I didn't do a positive pressure test of the loop, and the first time we go out, drop down, I put some gas into the loop and a hose fires off from the back of the unit. My next breath was water. But we'd done enough of the bailout drills during that preliminary time and during that training time that as water comes into the loop, you just fire over onto open circuit, pull in a reg and move on, end the dive. And so it's really important that as you're absorbing all of these safety drills and getting that repetition and repetition, that you're taking the whole thing very seriously. I also found when I first dived on the Rebreather that as you move from open circuit to closed circuit, you don't keep a tight seal on the regulator. And in open circuit, it doesn't really matter. Air can escape out of there and it's not really a problem. And as you're diving on a loop with a slightly lower pressure vacuum holding it into your mouth, you let the release of your lips go around the mouthpiece and suddenly you feel this cold water flooding into your loop. And you're going, oh, that's not going to be very nice to all the powders and scrubbers that I've got in the back there. But it wasn't long before I'd logged up over 100 hours and was able to then look at doing my instructor course. But most importantly, why is it a game changer for recreational divers? Well, noise for me is the primary one, not so much bottom time. Have you ever heard fish chewing? It's unreal to hear the noises that the reef's making. Now, if you free dive, you may have heard it in the very short period of time that you've got down there. But I'm able to take this bad boy out for 3 hours at a time. And so whilst I'm diving, I can hear the fish crunching and chewing on the reef. I can hear some of the fish communicating with each other with little sounds they make, the grunts, the snappers, the different noises that they make. As I've just said, the efficiency of one of these units is incredible. 3 to 4 hours that you can get. Now I limit this to a 3-hour session because that's how long we take the boat out for. But you can get some seriously long dives. Now the advantage of the Rebreather over open circuit is you don't get as cold. Why? As you're breathing and there's the reaction between the scrubber and the carbon dioxide and it's stripping that carbon dioxide out, it creates a thermic reaction. What does a thermic reaction do? Well, it creates two byproducts, moisture and heat. So the moisture goes back around the loop and so you're always driving with moist air, so you don't get that dry mouth effect, but also you're diving on warm air, warm gas. And so as a result of warm gas going into you all the time, you don't feel as cold. So out here, being able to do a 3-hour dive on a Rebreather in my standard shark skin top isn't that challenging. You don't have that numbingly cold sensation as you spend a long time underwater. But the critical thing is that you're no longer diving. It's not the same as strapping a unit on your back, rolling off the boat, going for a plunge. You're now diving with a life support system on your back, a nitrox mixing machine, so that you can change the blend of nitrox for the next few breaths that you're going to have, and you can adjust things on the fly. And so that focus of what you're doing and how you're diving, it becomes quite addictive in and of itself. It has that technical lean to it, even though we are just diving recreationally. But the most important thing for me is the interactions with the marine life. They don't look at you as one of those noisy, bubble-blowing scuba divers anymore. They look at you as a big, sod-in fish. And as a big, sod-in fish, they want to come and check you out. And so quite regularly we'll have encounters with rays, we'll have encounters with snappers, and from time to time, even some big sharks. But I wanted to become an instructor on the CCR, just in the same way as I had become an instructor on Sidemount, so that I can share it with a few people. I wouldn't necessarily say I am a Sidemount instructor or I am a CCR instructor, as that would suggest that I dive this configuration the majority of times I dive and that I teach this the majority of times I teach, and that's not the case. I wanted to get the instructor rating and I wanted to be able to teach people in the shop, but also people that I get to know and enjoy spending time with them. And the reality of teaching CCR was that I needed to unlearn a lot of the bad habits that I had developed through doing open circuit diving and needed to relearn a new set of rules. And there's nothing more humbling than an open water student spotting your mistakes when you're diving on a rebreather. And my final advice, if anybody is thinking of trying rebreather diving, having done open circuit and maybe dabbled with a little bit of twin set or side mounts, train hard, dive often, and never stop practicing for failures. So, maybe should I try a side mount rebreather next? Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up, splash down on the subscribe button and hit the notification icon if you want to get more content like this delivered to your inbox. We really appreciate you taking the time to watch our content. Please feel free to add any comments below, as they really help us understand what you're watching, what you're thinking, and help us to make content that suits you better. As I said, thanks for watching, guys, and stay diving.